Welcome to Slow Living Diaries. This is a safe space filled with quiet moments, calm vibes, and meaningful reflections. Today I'd like to talk to you about a blog post that I wrote a few years ago titled How My Plant Saved My Life. I thought it was just fitting to make a video about it, as I know a lot of you see my plants in my videos, in my photography, and in the pages of my books. And so, I thought I would take you on the journey of my growing love for plants and plant care. But I would say it started in 2012. My sister gifted me a jade plant, also known as a money tree. And I remember my first thought when she gave it to me was, like, how do I not kill it? I don't want to kill it. And it's quite interesting because when I meet new plant people today, or people who don't know much about plants, that's what they say to me. They have this fear of killing the plant. And over time, my perspective has changed. It's not about not killing it, but it's more about helping them to thrive and grow and to be the best that they can be. And so, a nice perspective shift for you. One is kind of led by fear of failure, and the other one is more focused on the success, and that comes with practice. But at that time, back in 2012, that was my perspective, and I remember just being really worried. I don't know why it was, but in my mind it's like I had to care for this thing and I didn't know how. And she said to me, don't worry, just pot it up and everything will be fine. And so as time went by, I noticed that one of the leaves fell off, and straight away I called her and I said, oh my gosh, the leaf's fallen off, the plant's dying. And she was like, chill bro, relax. Just take that leaf and pot it back into the same pot. Just get the end of it and put it into the soil around the stem. And I did, and a few weeks later, I saw roots developing on it. And I was just amazed. I was just like, how is that possible? That's magic. How can something that, from my perspective, seemed like it was dying, produce something completely new? And I think that was the point where I became hooked. I was like, this is magic. I want to know more about this. That's just one plant that dropped one leaf that created a whole new plant. I need to understand this. I need to, see how deep does this go. This is a jade plant. Unfortunately, this is not the same jade plant that she got me. Unfortunately, that one had root rot about a year ago. Horrible. But this one's a great example. This one is about 6 or 7 years old, and it started from one of these tiny leaves from another plant. I let it root, very, very tiny leaf, and it grew into a little stem. Another leaf came, and now here it is with a whole thick trunk and it's doing its thing. But I think that was what got me hooked. That was the point where I said I became a plant person. And so what I started to do from that point was take leaves off it and keep putting them in the soil and growing multiple jade plants. So I think my first 7 plants were jade plants, and I think I gifted some away. I think I just kept growing them from there as experiments. And then I believe she gave me my second plant too, which was a peace lily. And from that point, I just started to really get deeper into it, and I started trying to germinate everything from lemon seeds, apple seeds, getting them in a little bit of tissue, spraying them, putting them in the fridge to simulate winter, and then when they sprout and get a root, sow them. And I think it was more the unknown of how this happens that intrigued me. And so, in my mind, I was growing an apple tree, and it's something that I could see 10 years from now. Where will that tree be? Grown from one seed, from one apple that I'd usually just chuck away. And I thought that was amazing. So I live in the UK, and so the weather here is not very good at all. Most of the time it's miserable. So we don't get a very big window of outdoor gardening weather. But because I was growing these apple trees and lemon trees, it was best to put them outdoors. And so in the summer, I'd be in my garden gardening, and I really just started to get a feel for, just the process of gardening and pruning and cutting down the weeds and taking off the dead bits and just making my plants outside look amazing. Yeah, but it's short-lived in the UK. So in the winter, you have to, come indoors. And so what I did is I brought my trees, my little apple trees and lemon trees, I brought them indoors and continued to care for them. And it's very hard to simulate outdoor weather inside, especially when you don't live in a tropical climate. And I just found myself gardening more and more and more. And I think that first winter was when I really saw that I enjoyed gardening and I didn't want the weather to dictate whether I could garden or not. And so I started to get more indoor plants. And I started with very basic plants like snake plants and succulents and cacti, things that didn't require too much care. And then, you start to connect with people who love plants also, and then you get gifts. And it's just, I think that's one of the most beautiful things about plants is the memories that they have. And this story that I'm telling you about my sister giving me this plant, and that's such a long time ago, and it started with one tiny plant and it's turned into this, and those memories cannot be erased. And the same is true when you gift other people plants. You maybe start their plant journey or add to it, and there's so much meaning attached to individual plants and their stories and times when you bought them and where you bought them from, and how they were when you first bought them compared to how they are now. And I think it's a beautiful thing. But as with anything, the more you focus on it, the more it expands. And for me, that's what happened. As I got deeper into the plant community, I was learning more, I was connecting with more plant people, and almost like a focus shift within my life. So maybe my attention was somewhere else before that was probably not productive. But by having this new hobby, that's what it was, I guess, at the time, it was something that I could intentionally put my mind into and not waste my time doing other less productive things. And so I just found that I love the process of gardening in general, and not just, having plants just to look good, but I enjoyed going to garden centers. I enjoyed watching plant YouTube videos and tutorials and plant tour collections and different things like that. I found within my own plant journey that the more that you research and the more that you garden and the more that you watch and consume, the more familiar you become with your own plants. And it's kind of like a relationship. The time that you invest into them, it's like you really become familiar with everything to do with them. So I can go and visit someone and they have the same plant as me, and I get a very different experience with that plant because I haven't put in the same amount of time with that plant as I have mine. Even though it's the same variety, same plant, maybe it's bigger, who knows? It just doesn't feel the same. I think that's the beautiful thing. Your plants become a personal reflection of the time that you've put in with them, the relationship that you've built with them. And like I said, for me, it's not just about the aesthetics of how beautiful it looks or how it can make your home look. It's a reciprocal relationship where the more that I invest into them, the better it does for me emotionally, mentally, just to have clarity. But also they thrive and they bloom and they look vibrant, and that improves your space. That improves your, I guess, commitment to wanting to care for them more. When you see that what you're doing is working, you want to do more of it, you want to get better at it. And that's really what's happened with me in my journey. There is something that I've noticed in the plant community for a long time, and it's usually from people who don't have plants, where they're very kind of judgmental towards you, or they don't understand it, and so they'll say things like another plant and kind of make you feel guilty for your purchases. And I used to kind of play into this and always make an excuse why I bought a plant or try to create a reason to justify my purchase. And then one day I thought about it and I said, I shouldn't feel guilty for healthy investments. These plants do so much for me, and I could be spending my money on far worse things. There are a lot of other negative vices out there and things that people invest in that are a lot more harmful. And so I kind of changed my perspective on that and stopped playing into that, I guess, stereotype or way of thinking that I need a reason to buy a plant. other than the fact that I like it, or that I want it, or I think it will do well in my space, or I want the challenge of keeping this very rare, delicate plant alive and thriving and happy. And so I've just, changed my perspective. Those are the two main perspectives that I've changed. The first one being, I'm not just trying to stop it from dying, I'm trying to help it to be the best that it can be. And the second one is not feeling guilty for healthy investments. If you've been following my work, it's no secret that my work is a lot about vulnerability and feelings and emotions and mindset and healing and trauma. Depression and anxiety is something that I've struggled with within my own life. And I found during my low times that I would naturally go to do gardening, and I didn't pay attention to it. I just found that it was something that when I'm gardening, I cannot think about anything else. As soon as my hand is in that compost, it's like a connection that I just cannot explain. I just zone out, and for those few moments where I'm working or tending to the needs of those plants, I feel free. I feel like I'm in the middle of a forest in nature, or at the edge of the shoreline of a beach, just looking out into infinity. And it's when I have maximum capacity for mental clarity. I think my plant collection is a reflection of how much low times I've actually had, because sometimes I find that I'm working on my plants and they just don't need anything from me. They're flawless, they're happy, and then I go and get another plant so I can work on it. And sometimes I'll just go and get a rescue plant or a plant that looks like it's dying in the shop, just for the challenge of bringing it back to good health. I think there's something in that it's almost like my emotional state at that time can identify with where that plant is. And I think if I can nurture it back to life, then I can nurture me back to life, type thing. So I do remember a time where I was feeling very low and there was nothing I could do to pull myself out of it. And at this particular time, I looked around and I looked at my life, and it just felt like everything I was doing was failing. I was hitting this glass ceiling. It felt like everything I loved I was losing. Everything I touched just seemed to crumble. And for someone who's very creative and as meticulous as I am at what I do, that could be quite damaging to confidence, self-worth. You start to think that my best isn't good enough. And that's a hard pill to swallow when you have such high standards for yourself and for the things that you do. And it's just like everything was so dark at that time. And I just recall looking around and just seeing life around me. And in those moments, as dark as my world felt, I couldn't ignore or be ignorant to the fact that I was surrounded by vibrant, thriving plants that looked healthy, they were healthy, and I did that, and that made me real happy. I was like, despite me feeling the way I'm feeling, I was still capable of creating an environment that feels like peace, even though my life at that time didn't feel like peace. And I think that was enough to kind of get me through that season of depression. Gardening kind of became a protective factor for me. Whenever my life felt out of control or not very good, I looked around and I said, even in the midst of chaos or sadness and destruction, I was still able to facilitate healthy life and be a big part of all of these guys' growth journey. And that made me proud. So at times where I feel stressed, I garden. Times when I'm angry, I garden. Times where I'm upset, I garden. And even times where I feel inspired or motivated or happy, I garden. And it's something I can do at any time. I've made it accessible for me to tap into this type of therapy, and that's really what they became for me. The whole process, from buying pots to pruning them, to cleaning them, to dusting the leaves, to increasing humidity or watering them, giving them correct lighting, all of it is therapy for me. And And sometimes you have to find alternative methods. You know, at that time, I think I was on a waiting list for therapy here in the UK, and I could sit and just wait for that waiting list, or there's other things that I can do to improve my well-being and my own mental and emotional health. And so gardening really became that for me. So I want to take this moment just to encourage you to explore for yourself what your thing might be. It doesn't have to be gardening and houseplants. It may be something else. It may be drawing or painting or writing or reading. But whatever it is for you, if it makes you feel good and it's healthy, you know, do more of it, especially at the times where you can identify that you're not in a good place. Anything that you do that contributes towards your overall mental well-being, do more of it, make space for it, and try to incorporate it into your daily life. And I say that to say this to you, you know, if I didn't have all of these plants and I was in one of those seasons of feeling depressed or anxious, my energy kind of flows into my home. And when I think of home, I think of those feelings of depression, because that's how I normally feel when I'm here. And so by creating an environment that feels like peace, even though depression is there or anxiety is there or stress is there, you also have the opposite. You also have peace, and you have things to remind you of happiness and joy. And so my home becomes a place of peace when I think of it, not the emotions and feelings that I feel quite often. Because I garden so much, I create good memories that link to my home and in my environment. So coming home is always an exciting thing, because I know no matter what, I'll be greeted with the things that I like seeing and feeling. And if you don't have a thing, it's sometimes that your place of peace is out external, and it's not something that you can access all of the time. And so to bring it into your home, whatever feeling you want to feel, I think is a great thing to do. And I encourage you all to do it, even if it's just a corner in your home that you create as your little meditation corner or your safe space in your house. You know, I encourage you to do that, because it can be very rewarding for you in challenging times. Speaking of challenging times, another time that I felt this heavy cloud of depression, I remember it was a year after I sadly lost my daughter. I remember being or shortly after, going on a US tour, a book tour, and I was so busy and just so locked into my mission of my work that I didn't process the emotions of it or the feelings of such great loss. And I remember when I returned from that tour, I just crashed. It's like the moment I stopped working and stopped distracting myself, everything hit me. And, you know, it's no secret. I think you may have read about it online. If not, you should go and check out my memoir. If not, go and check out my memoir, Monochrome. Boom. But yeah, I do recall, you know, but at that time I remember deactivating everything. I came off social media, and for the next 4 years I was just doing things like gardening and painting and just kind of reconnecting with nature. I was taking walks in the woods and just really trying to find my joy again and find meaning. Why am I here? What am I here for? And so when I eventually did come back, I just had a renewed perspective on life and my own life and what I want for my life and who I am without social media, without my work, without the labels, just who I am if you took all of that away. But I recall a time where I woke up very, 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 very upset and very sad and in a very, very dark place. And I was convinced this was the last day that I was going to be alive. I didn't want to be here anymore. I felt tremendous amount of pain and I just wanted it to stop. It's not that I didn't want to be alive. I just didn't want to feel anything anymore. And I recall going to have a shower, and when I came out of the shower and I came back into my room, there was compost everywhere on the floor. And my peace lily was on the floor, uprooted. I had just watered it the day before, so the carpet was stained. It was just chaos. at like 7 a.m. in the morning, and I sat there and then I slowly cleaned it up, trying not to stain the carpet further. And it was my cat, Callie. She's such a blessing, but she's such a terror, a little tiger. She was trying to climb up and she pulled the pot down, and yeah, it's happened many times. But that day, by her doing that, in between the time of me cleaning up the compost and repotting that plant, I felt better. I went from not wanting to be alive and having plans to leave this world to wanting to go to the garden centre and buy another plant. That really highlighted to me how meaningful these plants are to me. And yeah, I get emotional still thinking about that day. And you know, for a lot of people it's just plants, you know, but for me it's a real connection that keeps me alive, and it's kept me alive. And of course Callie saved my life too that day. But that's what my blog was about. It was about that journey of how I got to that point, and you know, how one moment changed everything for me. And yeah, so I'm thankful for that peace lily, because it was quite symbolic. You know, my life didn't have peace at that moment, and to walk into the room and see peace on the floor and just destruction and chaos, it's almost like it mirrored to me what my life felt like and looked like. It just felt like mess and disaster, and I had to clean it up. I had to take responsibility. And so similar to our lives, you know, you have to take responsibility sometimes for your own mental well-being. You cannot rely on waiting list or someone else to fix it for you. You have to clean it up, and I took my time with it. I didn't rush the cleanup. As upset as I was about the compost, I was more upset about other things that were happening in my life. But I took my time. There was patience, and I was very meticulous with it. And that peace lily, I will show it to you. I still got it today, you know. And when I look at it, I think, you've had worse days. That day was one of your worst days, and now you have better days, and it's the same is true for me. But some of the things that my plants teach me, definitely patience. You know, I kind of feel like they talk to me. They say, what you do for me today, you won't see today. You won't even see tomorrow. It may take months, but keep loving me. Keep nurturing me, keep caring for me, and you will see the results. And the same is true for our lives. What you do today, you won't see today. You won't see tomorrow or the next day. It may take weeks or months or sometimes years, but keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, and you will see the results. And in the case of plants, their leaves become more shiny, they grow bigger, you get new leaves, you get new growth, you get sometimes new plants, you know. And it's really a test of patience, and which really helped me to slow down. And I think that's when my slow living journey began. Those years I took offline. There's no rushing with gardening. Here's what it is. You know, sometimes I was in the garden trying to get to the root of something that was in the garden, a tree or something, and you don't realize how far the roots spread under the ground. And they say sometimes the roots are as tall as the plant is above the soil, beneath the ground, and sometimes even more. They stretch for miles and miles, trees. And so digging and digging, trying to get this plant out, and you think you've got there, but the roots keep going and going, and you have to keep digging. It takes time. You cannot rush the process. And it's really helped me to be patient within my work, within how I book things in my calendar, within the time that I spend with people, just being present in the moment, what I'm doing in that moment. You don't see the result of it until a later time. And so yeah, patience and slowing down is probably the main thing that I've learned from my plants. The more time that I spend gardening, I find that I kind of get in tune with their rhythms and their seasonal changes and shifts. And so I kind of feel like I've turned into a plant. The way I care for myself is similar to my plants, you know. One of the funny things about plants is you can give them too much light, and then you can give them not enough light. You can give them too much water and not enough water. You can give them too much humidity and not enough humidity. Sometimes the compost is too thick or too dense, sometimes it's too chunky. And so you have to find the middle ground in all things with plants. It's this small area of balance. And again, the way I am as a person, I try to cultivate that in my own life, a balance of, okay, sometimes I work too much and I need to chill. Sometimes, I'll be chilling and I think I need to be working, and it's just not. The balance is not correct. And sometimes just changing one thing, like cooking, ingredients. Sometimes you put too much of something and it changes the whole meal. And it's the same with gardening. And I really love exploring that side to it. I like to find the middle ground. And so, my plants have helped me to recalibrate my pace and find my middle point, my balance. And it's a beautiful thing once you get to that point. And so there's a level of attention to detail that you have to have, otherwise you'll miss things, because there are always subtle changes and things that you need to be aware of. And like I said earlier, the more familiar you are with your plants, the quicker you will realize those things and see what it needs and be able to attend to them. But I challenge myself in my own personal life to look at my life with the same level of attention to detail that I do my plants. So I can look at my plant and see what it needs. I need to be able to look at myself and see what I need and give it the same level of care and attention and time investment each day. But having that level of attention to detail doesn't mean that you master this. You're constantly learning and constantly making mistakes. Things change, and a great example of this is my favorite plant that I've owned. It was the top of the food chain, the royal emperor of my plant kingdom, Monstera deliciosa albo. This is a variegated version of the monstera Swiss cheese plant, which looks like Swiss cheese because it has the slits and the holes in them. This plant, I'd seen it for many years and I wanted it. The problem was it was very expensive and very rare. But I didn't allow that to stop me. And so I got one and I just treated it like the king of all kings. And I gave it the best of everything. And I did a lot of research on how to look after it. And because of the care that I put into it, I noticed it was growing in a certain way. I always had it facing the light. And so all of the leaves were kind of like, hey, just facing forwards, and the gaps between them were just perfect. And I always joked and said I should enter it into a competition because I just felt like it was the most beautiful one I've ever seen, and I did that. So for as long as that plant is doing well, I'm okay with anything else that happens in my plant collection, because they all bow down to the great majesty of my albo. But what happened was, I noticed that it started to not look well. And, it was something about it. And again, that connection you can just see. And didn't lose any leaves. It was still standing in its beautiful posture. But I just looking at it and I was just like, you're not happy. What's wrong with you? And as the days went by, I noticed that the stems were starting to look a bit frail, and then one or two of the leaves started to yellow. And I was like, hey, you don't do that. What's going on here, And so I went, and what I normally do is check the roots. The first thing I check, and when I repot it, such a sad story really, but when I repot it, it had root rot. And the compost was so wet, and I was just so confused. Like, how did this happen? I don't overwater. I've kept the same routines and patterns, and literally they're on a diary. I know what they need when they need it. How did this happen? And what happened was, I moved home, and although my care remained the same, the environment was different. And so the compost wasn't drying out as quickly. And so I kept my same schedule, but I was just drowning the thing, and it got root rot. So this is my albo now. I showed you it in the picture, but this is it now. And it's now 8 plants because I've had to cut it at each node. The amazing thing about these plants is they grow aerial roots. Again, like my sister's plant that she got me, it being able to bring new life from one leaf and grow new roots. These grow aerial roots that then grow more roots that create new plants. And so, as devastated as I was, we are all still in mourning, all of us. We are looking at the king and we are in complete shock and sadness. As devastating as those few days were, I didn't want to do any gardening, I didn't want to talk to anyone, I didn't want to see any albos online. It felt like the whole kingdom was crumbling. But as sad as those few days were, there's one plant that potentially now becomes 8 plants, and they may not all succeed in this form of water propagation, but there's an opportunity here to start a new journey, and that's what plants are about, It will not grow the same as it did before, and it will be beautiful in its own way. But this is just an example to say to you, even someone who's experienced in gardening goes through it. We lose plants and we get new plants, and that's the cycle of life. Nothing is forever. And so when I take it back to the beginning, my perspective of, oh my gosh, I don't want to kill it, to where I am now, where I'm okay with this, and that shows growth and change in me of my perspective on life itself. And so sometimes there's a lesson in that. Sometimes the things that you lose can be multiplied into something far greater, and it feels painful in the moment when you lose it, but there is a hope of something new, a new journey. And now I'm paying more attention to the other plants, and they're all fighting for the number 1 spot and the throne. Right now, this monstera Thai constellation has, taken the number 1 spot in the hierarchy in the kingdom temporarily. But if they behave, someone else is up. The spot is available for all of them. I tell them that it's up for the taking. But yeah, until this comes back, someone else is going to have to take the responsibilities of being at the top of the food chain. And so I link this back to slow living, because I have to now wait for these, and these may take months to produce roots. And so that's maybe 4 or 5 months of me looking at the plant and not seeing it in the same way that I saw it before. But the process of me waiting and every week changing the water it builds a consistency in me, which trains the plant to know, oh, okay, I can trust this new environment. Everything's going to be okay. And sometimes that's all we need to do in our own lives, create a routine that makes us feel safe and comfortable enough to start to bloom. So yeah, as I mentioned before, gardening for me really creates the opposite experience to struggles and the things that I struggle with. My time could be used thinking and stressing about the things that are stressing me, but instead I'm investing them into peaceful thoughts and things that make me feel good. And as a result, it's cultivating, a balance in my life that yes, there are hard times, but there are also good times, and I'm creating those good times intentionally. And so one of the things that's nice for me is when I leave my home, I'm surrounded by nature. I love looking at trees and the sky and grass and greenland and woodland and anything natural, the ocean. And when I come home, I'm surrounded by nature, and I've chosen that for myself, that that's where I feel most at peace. And so I can intentionally surround myself or create an environment that facilitates a life of peace and calm and being slow and being mindful. And every time I garden, it slows me down. It makes me put things into perspective, and I always feel better after I've done it. One of the things that I thought were really interesting was the beginning of that first leaf growing roots by itself is what intrigued me, and I guess it's the science. I wanted to know how this happens, and so over years of research, you start to see all the health benefits of plants, improved air quality, better sleep, and just, what endorphins are activated when your hands are in the earth. And the interesting thing is that there's a lot of research to suggest that there are great health benefits towards having plants, especially with mental health. And what I loved about that is I experienced all of those things before I learned about them, before I read about them or researched them. So the research for me was just confirmation that this is a good thing and it's working for me. And so sometimes it's good to do things before you know the rewards of doing them, because you can experience the rewards without the knowledge, and just kind of enjoy it and accept it as it is, rather than getting someone else's input and deciding it has to be that for you. I didn't ask for peace when I started gardening, but it gave it to me. If you're a plant person, please do comment below. What's your favorite plant? How do plants make you feel? Do you have a similar plant story, or what is your plant story? If you don't have plants, I encourage you, get one. Start small, go and get a cacti and just learn how to nurture it and see if it makes you feel any of these wonderful things that I feel when I'm gardening. It'd be very interesting to know how your gardening helps you, you know, and how it makes you feel. Are there other things that it helps you with that's not necessarily mental health related? Or do you have a certain gift or a plant that means something to you that's helped you to grieve or to, you know, overcome a certain challenge in your life? I'd be really interested to know. And also, the plant community is so beautiful. You can, you know, it's great for connection and community. So I do hope that you all engage below, and maybe we can form new plant communities and have conversations about plants, because I can talk about it all day. But yeah, some of the plants in my collections, I've got peace lilies, which I've mentioned. This one here, this is a ZZ Raven. This is probably one of my favorites too, definitely. I love the dark black foliage. Again, my sister told me about this plant. They have a green one, they have variegated ones, but I just love the black. It's like very, very dark green, but it appears to be black. I love it. I have bird of paradise, I have pothos, I have money trees, I have marantas, which are like the prayer leaves. They're so beautiful because at night time they fold up like into prayer hands, and in the daytime they're like, hey. Have ficus and monstera cobra, baby monsteras, bamboo, anything I can grow, thyme, herbs, anything that can get roots, I'm that guy. And so, you know, my collection is not so much about how many plants I have, it's more about what they all individually mean to me. And I love to be able to say, you know, this plant, I got it here. I've got plants from other countries, you know, I've got leaf cuttings that I've got from certain vacations and times abroad, and I've been able to grow them here, and it's just a beautiful thing. But yeah, I couldn't fit all of my plants in the frame. I did try to bring as many as I could, but if I put them all here, you wouldn't see me. For me, it's more about how the plants make me feel, more than kind of like any kind of external validation of how many plants I have or how nice they look. It's a really personal journey, and which is why, you know, I've taken this long to even make a video talking about plants, because it's really just for me. But it can be for you too if you choose to. One more thing I want to share before I go, coming back to this story, is the environment was the problem. It wasn't my care, you know, and the same is true for us as humans. We, you know, sometimes we do the same things over and over again. They work in certain environments, but in others it won't. And so I want to encourage you today to surround yourself with things and people who are going in the direction that you want to see your life. If you want more peace, surround yourself with peaceful things. Create a peaceful environment. There's nothing like turning the lights down low, lighting a candle, getting all of your gardening things and just spending an hour gardening. In that hour, you're not stressing, you're not worrying, you know, and like I said, it could be anything. But create pockets, create windows, create safe spaces where you can do the things that bring you peace, you know. So what you watch influences you, who you hang around influences you, who you follow online influences you, influences how your home feels, how your mind feels. And so you can do the same thing over and over again, but it's not always what you're doing, it's the environment that you're doing it in. And so really like use that as a self-awareness point. You know, are you in the correct environment for the life that you want to live? And does that environment help you to thrive like my plants are thriving? But that's enough for today. Maybe I will do another update on this monstera albo so you can see for yourself what patience, love, affection, and time can do when you are willing to surrender to it and trust the process of it. Thank you for watching if you've managed to make it this far. I just want to show you again how beautiful it is. Until next time, stay blessed, and I wish you better days. And thank you to my sister. Shout out to my sister, Nature's Girl. She's the reason for all of this.